So we're starting a discussion on benefit estimation. And this is an important sort of aspect of it. And we'll look at two things here in benefit estimation and how do we model benefits. The two things we're going to look at is one would be sort of like the project level benefit estimation. And then we'll look at sort of a larger economy benefit estimation. Sort of at a macro level, what might that look like? Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. So if you look at the project benefits, they fall into three different categories. One is the impact on the providers. So mostly that will be costs and revenues. And then you could look at some cost savings as benefits as well. So this is about the providers. And then the impacts on users, time savings, user cost, safety, consumer surplus, whatnot. And then the external impacts. Okay. And the external impacts would be sort of the third party impact. Like, for example, if there is an airport opens up, then, you know, the neighbors who live near that airport will be dealing with the noise, for example, right? So there will be external impact. So what we'll try to do in this, we've talked a lot about the provider cost, right? We've looked at the cost function, the benefit function, the whole thing. However, we haven't yet looked at the impact on users, and we haven't talked about the consumer surplus. We briefly mentioned it. So I want to focus a little bit on that. And then also we'll want to look at like the broader impact on the economy of a transportation project. Right? We won't finish this section, but we'll continue on early next week as well, but we should be able to wrap this up by early next week. Okay. So value of travel time savings. Travelers and shippers' behavior consistently reveals significant economic value to travel side. So now in transportation economics and transportation planning, we talk about something. There are two things, right? One is a stated preference versus a revealed preference. You know, stated preference is what is the toll that you're going to be willing to pay when somebody asks you in a survey, right? Sometimes people will ask you, hey, if you were to be able to save 5 minutes, how much toll would you be willing to pay? However, in some circumstances, you can actually measure the revealed behavior of people. Revealed behavior being you look at how much travel time people who are going on the free lane versus people who are going on toll lane. You can look at the time differential, and you can look at the actual toll the people who are on toll lane paid for it, right? And you can look at that differential and you can get a revealed preference. And this is what we are talking about here, is that the travelers and shippers' behavior reveals that there is, you know, people are willing to pay money to save travel time. And using that, how much money they're willing to pay, you can estimate how much they value travel time saving. And cumulative value of travel time savings saved through the project lifecycle is typically the largest benefit used to justify project costs. So we look at the delays, savings of the delay as the biggest benefit for travel time savings. So it's a lot of time. And this is not something that's, you know, that's always the best. Excuse me for a second, please. Okay, my apologies. Okay, we're back now. So now, you know, there's obviously, you know, concerns here, right? We cannot always use travel time savings to justify project investments, although we've done that a lot and we'll probably continue to do that. But it has its own pitfalls, right? Because a lot of times that travel time savings are based on automobile travel time savings, and we justify very large highway projects based on that. So that's problematic. However, those principles themselves are not problematic, and how they are applied by giving preference to automobile travel could be problematic. But if you look at the idea of travel time savings, that itself is not a wrong idea. Like, you know, you could look at if you provide new transit connections also. So, you know, there are how you apply this in these principles is the issue, not necessarily the principles themselves. Principles themselves of valuing valuing travel time savings is the right idea. The value of travel time saved varies in relation to factors such as traveler income, lifestyle, trip purpose and urgency, trip length and usability of time saved, and comfort of travel experience leads to walk time, wait time, transfer time penalties. So travel time savings, the value of travel time depends on how you value your travel time, right? I mean, obviously, if you're a high income individual, a big shot lawyer or whatever, every 15 minutes for you might be very expensive. And you might be willing to pay more tolls. And then how much money could you save based on that? What kind of trip are you making? So maybe there are, there's some interesting research I recently reviewed where I found that a lot of times on toll roads, there are sometimes they're called Lexus lanes or whatever, but people don't consistently use them. People use them only when they need it. And even low income people do tend to use them and then derive benefit from it. And it just depends on the urgency of the trip. And then trip length and usability of time save, and then comfort of travel experience, you cannot directly account for them. But if there is walking time, if there is transfer time, you just basically keep adding the penalties. So every minute of transfer time added adds a certain penalty. Okay. So maybe no transfer time. So basically having a direct route will have the lowest cost. But as soon as you add some transfer time, there's going to be a bigger penalty. And then smaller penalties could be added as more and more extra time is added to the transfer time or wait time. Same idea. So you basically add penalties to figure out the benefits. So for personal travel, value of travel time saved is usually related to the wage rates on the clock, 100% of the burden wages off the clock. So this would be your, when you're not being paid for this, a fraction of the wage rate, like 50% of urban travel, 75% for the intercities, 50% of your hourly wages. That's how we value the travel time. For freight, the value of travel time is based on the inventory valuation principles. Travel is equivalent to warehousing if delivery is reliable, right? So every good has a certain cost associated with if you have to keep it warehoused, right? So every time the inventory is in the warehouse, so they have some value that they assign to the time that, so a cost that gets assigned to anytime there is stuff that stays in the warehouse, right? Or cars that ship or that sit in the parking lots of the dealer, right? So there's cost associated with that. And then nowadays, we're seeing the flip side of this right now, but nowadays companies have figured out a very good just-in-time shipping model where they were trying to minimize the amount of time they have to keep the stuff in the warehouses. And they were getting just-in-time shipping delivered to their stores just as their deliveries were going down, or their quantities at the store were going down. And that worked really well because obviously they could minimize the cost and pass some of that savings to the consumer. But if you've sort of ordered something and if you've been paying attention to the news, there's a lot of concern about that because now our supply chains are so reliant on just-in-time deliveries that we are having this issue where the shippings are typically delayed and so forth. And so we cannot have a reliable shipping. So basically, travel right now is not equivalent to warehousing because the travel on the ships is taking too long, unloading the shipping is taking too long, and so on and so forth. But if the delivery was reliable, if the deliveries were in fact reliable, which we hope that will be the case soon enough, if the deliveries become reliable again, then the travel would be equivalent to warehouse. Okay? So value of travel time for freight, we use the inventory valuation principles to figure that out. Value of travel time saving for fixed demand. The net dollar benefit of a project that result in travel time saving is simple. You just take the total travel time saved per trip and you multiply that by number of trips, and then you'll be in good shape. However, the demand is not always constant. The demand does change over time. For variable demand, the usual situation, the dollar benefit of a project is determined based on the net social benefit principle. Okay. For variable demand, that's what happens. We have to figure out the net social benefit principle, and we'll talk about an example of that. And we did talk about the net social benefit principle at one point, right, in the class. That's what sort of gives us that supply and demand equilibrium. You recall that from, I think maybe 3 weeks ago, we were talking about this. Is that where supply and demand curve meet? Okay, that's what we call the net maximization of net social benefit pricing. Okay, if you look at the benefit that is captured by the supplier, so let's say the supplier sold a quantity that's Q. The supplier sold a quantity that's Q, and the unit price is P prime, and they sold a quantity equal to Q prime. So how much of the revenue did the supplier get? If they sold each unit for P prime, and they sold Q prime number of units, what is the benefit that's captured by the supplier? What is the revenue that goes to the supplier in that scenario? I'm going to pause and ask you to weigh in on this. So the answer that I received here is going to be the area that's represented by B. But if you look carefully, B is a rectangle that has a P prime. This side is equal to P prime. This side is equal to Q prime. So P prime times Q prime is the revenue that's captured by the suppliers. Does that make sense? P prime times Q prime, that's captured by the suppliers. And then rest of it, all the benefits. So if you look at the area, total area under the curve, the total A plus B, that's the total benefit. The suppliers are able to capture P prime times Q prime revenue from it. But all the rest of it is essentially captured by our consumers. And that's what we call the consumer surplus. And you can also think of the consumer surplus as, it's basically consumer surplus could be defined as what they would have been willing to pay versus what they did pay. Okay, so that as price rises, as this price goes up, the consumer surplus comes down. Consumer surplus comes down because now less of the benefit is being captured by the consumer. So the consumer share of benefit, the gross benefit is A plus B. The benefit captured by the supplier is B. So the benefit captured by the consumer or user is A. But as the price rises, consumer are able to catch or capture less and less of the benefits. Okay, but that A value is what we call the benefit captured by the consumer or the consumer surplus. The benefit captured by consumer is known as the consumer surplus. Regardless of how you determine the pricing, it measures the benefit captured by the consumers or users. Consumer surplus is the difference between consumers' aggregate willingness to pay versus what they actually pay. So the difference between the two quantities is the consumer surplus. Now, if you're talking about the public investment projects, like we are in this class mostly, the net benefit of a project is measured by the change in consumer surplus. So consumer surplus before the project subtracted by consumer surplus after the project, or vice versa. Consumer surplus after the project subtract the consumer surplus before the project or in the absence of the project, and then you get the consumer benefits. So let's look at this. Okay, let's look at this example right here. So your demand curve used to be like this. The D is the demand curve. On the y-axis, you have the price. On the y-axis, you have the price, P. And then on the x-axis, you have the Q, the quantity supplied. Okay. Now, your demand curve is always represented by D, demand curve right here. But by building a project or getting new buses or whatever, for whatever project, you were able to shift the supply curve down. So somehow you were able to shift the supply curve down this way. So supply curve used to be S1 initially. Now you've been able to shift the supply curve to S2. And that basically brought down the price that consumers were paying from P1 all the way down to P2. Okay. So your initial consumer surplus, was this red shaded area. Okay. And your final consumer surplus with this new supply curve, that you've just drawn. Okay. Your new supply curve now includes consumer surplus. That also includes this portion. Okay. So now, if you look at just this portion, that is newly captured consumer surplus or additional consumer surplus, that basically is the benefit. The benefit is delta of consumer surplus, change in the consumer surplus. And you can figure out this change in consumer surplus by basically adding up these two rectangles. One will be this rectangle, or these two shapes essentially. Okay, you can add the area of this rectangle, and then you can add to that the area of this triangle. Okay, so let me go ahead and do that again. So your change in consumer surplus will be area of this rectangle right here, plus the area of this triangle. Okay, and you can estimate that the area of the rectangle is essentially P1 minus P2 times Q1. So Q1, P1 is Q1 is this dimension. That's your Q1. And then the other dimension is P2 minus P1, or P1 minus P2, the other. So that's your area of this rectangle. And for this triangle, the area is half times base times height. Q2 minus Q1 is the base. P1 minus P2 is the height. And you multiply that by half to get the area of this triangle. And then you can basically use this and simplify it, and you will get this rule of half. So P1 minus P2 times Q1 plus Q2. And you can get your consumer surplus, change in consumer surplus. Okay, so you should be able to apply the rule of half to estimate the consumer surplus. And we're going to do an example of this. Using this one. Okay. So this is the last thing we're doing. We're going to work out this example, and that's going to be your next homework assignment. Is that, so there are two villages, village A and village B. So this is what's going on here. Oops. So this is, you have two villages. Village A and village B, and they both have to get to the market. Okay. And there are a bunch of these links there. And for each of these links, I'm going to highlight each of the link here. So there are a bunch of these links. There's this one link here that gets you directly from A to market. And then there is these links, And then this is another link. And then this last one is another link. Okay, this last one is another link. Now, if you're trying to go from village A to the market, the choice is clear. You take the least cost route, $11 trip, direct route. But if you take the other one, you can get to market, but it's going to cost you $13. You're not going to take that route. Okay. And here I'm assuming, making some simplifying assumption, that your cost is not changing depending upon how much trips are being made. So 1,000 trips don't cause the cost to rise on any of these links. The cost is still the same. It remains, or it's fixed, $6, $7, $11, and $3 on each of these links. And this cost is not changing by how many trips are being made. So this area is rural enough that never gets congested, is what we're saying here. Okay. If you're trying to go from A to market, how much would it cost you? Trying to go from village A to the market, how much would it cost you? You'll be able to tell me by reading on this slide. There's another way of going from A to market, 6 plus 7, $13, but you're not going to take that route because you're going to take this direct route. So your cost of going from A to market is only $11 per trip. The total cost will be $11,000. What about B to market? B to market is going to be $3 per trip. And then $7 per trip. So you could take $10 to go from B to market. You could take this other route, 3 plus 6 plus 11, but it's too much cost, too much higher cost. So you're not going to take that route. So cost of going from B to market was $10 per trip. So price was $10 per trip. And then Q is 1,000 trips being made. Now, something happened where agency improved the rural route, one of those routes. And what they improved, the link that they improved was this one right here, the $7 per trip link. It used to be $7, but now look at what happened. It only cost $3. Ooh, that's interesting, right? So they made improvements to this $7 link and made the cost of per trip only to be $3. Now, the amount of trips that were being made from A to market went up to 1,200. The amount of trips that were being made from B to market went up to 1,400. Okay. Now, what route would you take to go from A to market? What's your cost of going from trip A to market now? What is your cost of making the trip from village A to the market now under this improved scenario, under the after scenario? Resume recording. So the new cost under the new scenario, when this link has been improved to cost only $3 per trip, you're given the new numbers of trips and your cost of each trip has gone down to only $9 to go from village A to the market and only $6 to go from village B to the market. And now the trips being made are 1,400 trips. Okay. So here you can apply the rule of half. You can apply the rule of half to estimate the trip benefits. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. If you give me a minute here. So I'm going to go back to pause recording. I'm going to solve this. Perfect. So let's think about this. So I'm trying to go from A to market in the before situation. My total cost of going to market was $11 and the number of trips were 1,000 trips. And my B to market situation was that it's taking me $10 to go from B to market. And I was still making 1,000 trips per day. Now, in my after scenario, I can go A to market and I can go B to market. And I always look at the origin destination situation. Okay. So I'm looking at both A to market and B to market, what's happening. I'm not going to look at individual links anymore. And I'm going to convert that into the OD pair cost. So it's $9 per trip and total 1,200 trips. And then this is 1,400 trips. And then $6 per trip. Yeah. So question is, how do we estimate consumer surplus? So consumer surplus could be estimated by first for A to market trips. And I can apply the rule of half that I talked about. And then if you look at the rule of half formula, it's P1 minus P2 times Q1 plus Q2. Okay. So this is only for A to market trips. P1 used to be $11. Now it's only $9. Q1 plus Q2. Q1 is 1,000 plus Q2 is 1,200. So I end up with 2,200. So my consumer surplus in this scenario is 2,200 just for A to market trips. I need to do another calculation for B to market trips. Okay. For that B to market trips, this is what the consumer surplus might look like. Half of P1 minus P2, P1 minus P2. P1 used to be 10, now it's only 6. It used to be 1,000 trips before, and now there are 1,400 trips now. Half times 4 times 2,400, 4,800 is my consumer surplus, and I can add the total consumer surplus then. Will be 2,200 plus 4,800 is 7,000. Okay, so that's how you calculate the net consumer surplus. But remember, the key thing to remember is that you have to do this analysis based on origin destinations. Always convert the given problem and write it like this. Okay, what does it look like from my origin to destination? Now, obviously, this problem is simplified in that I'm always assuming a fixed cost. And in consumer surplus estimations, that's always what I'm going to give you. So you don't have to worry about cost changing based on trips. If they were changing, then obviously you'll have to do a little bit more math with user equilibrium and whatnot. But that's not what we are doing here. So you take the original scenario, construct the origin destination diagram, and then come up with Q for A to market and B to market trips, and then cost for both trips also. And then you, in the after scenario, you do the same thing. Now, one way I could complicate this problem, see here, I already gave you that the number of trips went from 1,000 to 1,200. And then for B to market trips, the number of trips went from 1,000 to 1,400. And I gave you that 1,400 and 1,200 numbers. So I gave you this number and this number, the 1,200 and the 1,400. But I don't have to give that to you. I could instead give you a demand curve or an equation that relates price with the demand. And then you might have to plug the numbers into that equation to figure out what those might be. So be prepared for that in the homework situation. Right? So you should be able to derive this, even if this value is not directly given, you should be able to derive it from the demand curve. Okay? Any questions about this? And then obviously you have to do it for both origin. A to market trips, you get the consumer surplus. B to market trips, you get the consumer surplus, and you add that consumer surplus to get the total consumer surplus for all consumers. Okay? Questions about this? Okay, it looks like we run out of time, so I'll stop here.